पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। The path to mukti. Mukti means freedom from the notion that one is worthless, small, inconsequential. Freedom from a whole host of wrong understanding centered on the self. Freedom, in short, from self-critique, self-judgment, self-loath. Freedom from the disease. What will others think? This is a very big disease. Freedom from this disease. Freedom from the inability to connect with others or difficulty in connecting to others that do not think or act or behave like oneself. The freedom from the impairment of being able to revel in Bhagavan's creation of these many and varied names and forms in the universe. Freedom from this life of becoming, always wanting to become somebody or the other, something or the other, where there is no end to this becoming. Freedom from internalizing the wrong notion that one is away from Bhagavan, that Bhagavan is not favoring one, that one is disconnected from the whole, from the source. And finally, freedom from self-disconnect. That is, in short, mukti. Moksha. Moksha, masculine noun. Mukti, same thing, from much root. Much, to free. Same root. From that we can either have a masculine noun, moksha, or mukti, feminine noun. So mukti, in short, is freedom from all afflictions, freedom from sorrow and fear, in the light of the understanding that I am not away from anything, that I am the whole, that I am already one with everything. Not only am I whole, I am limitlessly so, limitlessly whole. So then there is no constriction of any kind. Neither time nor space is coming in my way. I am the author of time as Satchidananda Atma. I am the author of space, and I am free of everything that I observe. This is mukti. The path to mukti necessarily goes through bhakti. Without bhakti, there is no mukti. Bhakti, of course, for an audience like this, I don't need to translate that word. But still, it means a deep surrender and devotion which accompanies the discovery of Ishvara as the source of this universe. So this is a conscious decision. Bhakti, even though it is already in the heart, it has to be awakened through the cultivation of various practices. And what for these practices are there? And what is the role of this bhakti in the pursuit of self-knowledge is going to be the topic for today because that is what the second and the third verses. The third verse we have to look at. We'll start that, and then this is what they talk about. Because the word samarpitaha comes twice in the second mantra. Tadyatha rathanabhau rathanemau cha araha sarve samarpitaha. Then that is in the example, and then in the example of the spokes of the wheel and the hub that holds everything together, because of which the wheel moves. And so samarpitaha means surrendered, taken refuge in. And so similarly, all the devas, the celestials with various forms and functions, these devas are not gods. We have to be mindful of that. These devas are basically the manifestation of Ishvara with regard to certain forms and functions. Sarve lokaha, all the lokas, all the fields of experience, all the various lokas in the universe, parallel realities that are there, in invisible realms, Swarga, etc. Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha. We have 7 lokas that are more comfortable than this one. And then we have 7 lokas that are less comfortable. And so all of them, 14 of them, 7 up and then 7 down. All of them are included. Sarve pranaha, anything that breathes, anything that has prana, all the pranis are included. Sarve eta atmanah samarpitaha. They are all, as it were, taking refuge in this Atma as Bhagavan. And what is this refuge? This refuge is, something which is very important to understand. Taking refuge in Bhagavan from the standpoint of self-knowledge means primarily to have a conscious program of dropping one's subjectivity. The ignorance casts a pall on the mind, and then there is a cataract of raga and dvesha, aka subjectivity. Anything that one perceives, it is a personal perception, a subjective perception, unless of course it is interrogated. So therefore, at any given time, at any given moment, one is not able to comprehend this knowledge and enjoy the mukti that it gives, primarily because there is something standing in the way. Ishvara's creation cannot be appreciated as an extension of oneself, or even as an extension of Ishvara, to whom I am surrendered. It cannot be appreciated as that, primarily because there is a parallel creation going on. There is what we call Ishvara Srishti, Ishvara's projection, and then alongside the Jiva not wanting to be left behind, because mind you, the Jiva is Ishvara, but not knowing that, starts one's own parallel projection, Vikshepa. Not to be outdone, the Jiva has a parallel creation going on. Jiva Srishti. And the Panchadashi, which is a very highly regarded text in Vedanta, talks about this. There is a whole chapter devoted to this Ishvara Srishti and Jiva Srishti, and how to tell the difference. What is Ishvara Srishti? The world as it is. The world, the universe as it is Ishvara Srishti, Ishvara's creation. And in that there will be so many things. So many things are there. And what is Jiva Srishti? Ishvara Srishti, covered by one's own preferences, prejudices, misunderstandings, etc. This is so this is Ishvara Srishti with a twist is Jiva Srishti. Ishvara Srishti with an overlay is a Jiva Srishti. Overlay of one's own personal hurts, pains, sorrows, agenda, etc., etc. Therefore, that is what is ignorance. That is the manifestation of Atma Ajnanam. That is what stands in the way of appreciating this universe. Because one cannot get past one's own pain, sorrows, and this parallel reality. So the first step to moksha, mukti, is to learn to live in Ishvara's universe without putting up one's own parallel reality. So what is Ishvara's universe? Ishvara's universe, as it is given to us, is there with, it is capable, it is something that is capable of transaction. So Ishvara's universe is an empirical universe made up of various namas and rupas. And the next mantra that we are going to study says, in fact, all the namas and rupas have one name. And what is that name? Hari. It's the Lord. Every nama and rupa is not anything separate from the Lord. It is definitely the Lord. It is all Hari. And how to hurry up and understand that? We have to drop everything that is not Hari within oneself. That is what has to happen. Because Hari and not Hari don't go together. And so therefore, this parallel reality is something that has to be examined and then let go of. The Panchadashi gives in this chapter, talking about Jiva Srishti and Ishvara Srishti, these two parallel creations, so to speak, gives a wonderful example. You are going on the road, and then you're just walking on the road. 3 people are walking on the road, and then the first one, and then there happens to be a big 10-carat diamond on the road, a big, precious gem, a diamond. It is called mani in Sanskrit. So seeing this diamond, so the diamond on the road, objective fact, there is a diamond on the road. And then 3 people encounter the diamond. 2 of them are standing, let us say, on the opposite sides of the road, and then they see the diamond almost simultaneously, and they try to outrun one another in order to catch hold of this diamond. And then, this is an ancient example, and then what happens? One of them, of course, as the story goes, gets there before the, other one. And then seizes the diamond and says, "Yay, I am rich, I got it." Hrishyati, is ecstatic, jumps up and down. Like the people in the Olympics winning the gold medal, They jump up and down, they beat their chest, they throw off their t-shirt into the air, and then they bite their medals. And this is what the one who got the gem, that person, she has a very ecstatic, what is that called? An ecstatic reaction. Yay, yippee, I got it, me, it's all mine. And then immediately plans start. Should I sell it? No, I think I should auction it. And then, think of the money. Think of what all I can do with this. And think of, the person is already on a trip, literally. I like this American word, trip, because one is on a mental trip. One is not in the present. One has already gone somewhere, and that money which has not yet come from selling the gem, which is still in the hand, is what? Is already spent in the mind. Panchadashi writer, Swami Vidyaranya, calls this Manorajya, a kind of a mental kingdom, an imaginary kingdom where that diamond can be dropped, that diamond can be robbed. By the time this woman goes from one village to her own village, she could be robbed. Nothing. Now all that is not considered at all. Already that money, the diamond has been sold, the money has been spent, a house has been bought, and then investments have been made. Where? All in the mind. This is the parallel reality. And what is Ishvara Srishti in this? Ishvara Srishti is just a diamond on the road. That is just an objective fact. This is Ishvara Srishti. What is Jiva Srishti? The Jiva Srishti is just threefold, but we are only seeing one aspect of it, at least threefold. So so the one who got the diamond is ecstatic. And now we turn our attention to the fellow who tried to outrun this woman and get the diamond and did not get the diamond. And what is his? He is in the doldrums. He is inconsolable. Oh no, I lost the diamond. This is what happens to me all the time. Somebody else walks off with the prize. And I ran harder and faster, and after all, that was a woman. I should have been easily able to outrun her. He didn't know that she was a marathon runner. That he was not aware of. So I should have been easily able to outrun her. What happened here? And why me? Why do I always get the short end of the stick? Why can't I have nice things? Why can't I, for a change, do something in order to be able to change my situation? What would have happened if I had got this? Why not me? Why me? Why only these bad things happen to me? That person is out of breath, having run those 100 yards, and then is inconsolable. This is another type of Jiva Srishti. Not type, but the same manifestation of Jiva Srishti. The first Jiva Srishti is because one got the object of one's longing. The second kind of Jiva Srishti is being denied the object of longing. And then what? Then there is a sadhu on the road. Being ancient times, there is always holy people walking on the road. Now, not so much. So that's why these are ancient stories. So then there is a sadhu, a holy person on the road. And the sadhu also sees the gem. And the sadhu sees these warring people and fighting each other out for the gem and outrunning one another for the gem. And the sadhu just says, because for the sadhu there is no difference between the gem and another roadside pebble. Why? Because the sadhu doesn't have a value added, some kind of a regard for the gem. The sadhu has nothing to gain, nothing to lose. And so the gem is like another pebble on the road. And to put it in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, the person of knowledge is samaloštashma kanchanaha. Sama means for one to whom this is even. What is even? Loshta, ashma and kanchana. Ashma, iron, loshta, some kind of a lump of dirt or clay or whatever it is. And then kanchana, gold. A nugget of gold and a pebble, stone, pebble, or ashma stone, and loshta, some metal, some other kind of thing. All that is one and the same. For whom a piece of metal, worthless metal, and a stone, and or clay, or what else, a gold nugget are one and the same. Why is that one and the same? Because, it's an objective expression. That is Ishvara Srishti. How is gold different from iron? Both are metals. Both have their mass. Both have their weight. And so if one were a scientist, and a scientist, was proposing to a would-be spouse and gave one iron ring as a proposal, that proposal would be refused. You see, because on part of the person receiving the proposal, there is a difference between gold and iron. Because we buy into a communal Ishvara Srishti, Jiva Srishti, a collective Jiva Srishti. Oh, this is more expensive, this is not so expensive, this is good, this is bad. All these things one has bought into. But from the standpoint of the sadhu here, looking at the gem, this is the eyes of equanimity, eyes of just looking at the Srishti as Bhagavan. What is the difference between the stone and the diamond? One shines, one doesn't shine, that's all. Or we can even say a piece of crystal and a diamond. What's the difference? Both of them are shining. But then the difference is ascribed by the human beings solely because it is rare. It is therefore that which is rare is expensive. Why should something that which is rare become expensive all of a sudden? Because there is some way in which the demand drives up the prices of things. When there is a demand, then the prices go up. Because why? Simply because it can. Because this is all about the private property and all these things. So the demand is there, and then because the demand is there, the price goes up, and then there is created a scarcity mentality. These companies do this all the time. They will say limited edition, so that everybody will go buy it quickly. I once was giving a talk, somewhere in New York City. And then we were supposed to go, first half of the talk was in one venue, first half of this seminar. And then the other half of the seminar was on at the another venue, not very far away, maybe 15-20 minutes by car. And then there were about 40-50 of us delegates for this event. And then as we were finishing up in one venue, and then there was a couple of buses that had come to transport the participants to the other venue. Word came that you cannot really go there by bus because there is a terrible traffic jam. Oh, why is there suddenly a traffic jam in the middle of the day? Is something bad happened? I hope it's not an accident. And we all started to pray because we thought it may be a terrible accident. But then quickly they found out that the traffic was jammed because the place where we were and the place where we were to go, in the middle there was the Apple store. Apple not in fruit, okay? Apple as in this computer and all these things. And that Apple had released some new thing. I forget what it was, whether it was an iPhone. See, they're very clever they are. Because everywhere the Atma is come. The word Atma they bring in. iPhone, iPad, iPod, iWatch. All these things. And there is a small ubiquitous I. This is all Jiva Srishti. They are very clever. And we buy into the Jiva Srishti. And so since there was only, I think, 50 of these, and so everybody from all, and then that release was just suddenly announced, everybody from all over the city, and maybe even from outside the city, drove in and caused this jam. So, that's why I gave this example, because people can't relate to diamonds. I mean, who wants diamonds? The iPhone is the new diamond. That is what it is. It costs as much, frankly. And so that is exactly what it is. And so therefore, this is, and so we had to abandon, just to complete the story, we had to abandon the plan of taking those two buses which would be completely stuck in the traffic, and we had to take 10, 12 taxis. We had to take taxis, which, New York taxis are very famous at being able to dodge the traffic. They know all the roads. And what would have taken 10, 15 minutes took 1 hour to reach there, even with the taxi. And so, like this is Jiva Srishti. Jiva Srishti attack, okay? Collective Jiva Srishti. So, yeah, and what is Ishvara Srishti here? Yes, there is the buddhi, the ability to put together this phone or whatever it was there, and then the ability to market it. Buddhi is there. Okay, that is the ability to bring this, which is useful, which has some use. You use the cell phone for many things, and other than making calls, it is in fact got so many things there. You can go on the internet. You have the calculator at your fingertips. You have a flashlight. You have, of course, most importantly, you have a camera. And then the next gen of the phones will also know how to make coffee. That is yet to come. Okay, so this is Ishvara Srishti. And the coffee part was just for fun. So this is Ishvara Srishti, that there is a device that can do these things. Jiva Srishti, I have to have it. And my phone is my identity. That's why it's called iPhone. The spoof is complete. The spoof is complete. I am as good as the phone. And if one loses the phone, finished. And there are so many articles that we read in the newspaper. People bash up each other because of the phone. Yeah, and all these things, people get into tiffs because of the phone. All so unnecessary. It's just a device. Why is it called device? Because one is in the vice grip of which, that is why it is called device. It is actually a vice, really. And so this is the problem. This is where the overlay of one's frenetic search for identity, that identity is projected onto the phone, onto the gem. And so you see, back to this example of the gem, 3 reactions, 3 responses to the same gem. One is neutral because one is a sadhu and one is in keeping with Ishvara Srishti, and one is agitated because of the loss of the gem, one is agitated because of the gain of the gem. And this is a very beautiful example, because if you can replace the gem with anything that you want, and the same thing, the same effect is yielded. This is with regard to possessions. Then what about people? Same thing. This is my person. This is your person. This is not my person. This is a friend. This is an enemy. Oh, I don't like how they dress. What have they done to you? It's, then you're not financing their wardrobe. No, but I still don't like how they dress. I don't like how they eat. I don't like how they act. I don't like this. I don't like that. So many things. And then, the same object which a few moments ago, which a few days ago, which a few years ago was an object of love, suddenly becomes an object of hatred. How? So, such a mystery. Such a mystery. And there was a couple that came, to my teacher. I happened to be there with him at this time. And they said, we are getting a divorce. And they looked so unhappy. And the teacher said, what's the matter? And the woman said, he doesn't love me anymore. And the teacher said, why? You're just newly married. What happened? And the man said, I do care about her. And but I don't know what her problem is. And she says, whenever he sees me, he makes a face. Before he used to not do that. Now he makes a terrible face. And whatever I say, he makes this face. And then the man said, no, I never made any face. I love her. I want to lead my life with her. I don't know what the problem is. And then suddenly he made a face right in front of us. He made a face. And what was that face? Like this. And then she said, see, this is how he goes. And then everything came to the light. It was allergy season, pollen season, and the man had terrible allergies. And so we were in the grip of allergies. He would, a sneeze would as though come, and he would try to sneeze, and then he was not able to sneeze because it would go away. And then he would make this face, this tortured face. And then just before that, she would have said something. Like she would have asked him something, do you really love me? And he would make this face. And so she just assumed that he doesn't care about her. And thanks to, great grace of Ishvara operating over time, this marriage was able to be saved. This marriage was able to be saved, and they were able to both laugh and then get some, because he had not had allergies in his life, so he didn't even know what it was. This was the first time he was in America. They had come from India after getting married, and for the first time. And so he did not even all this new pollen and new place. He did not know what these allergies were. And thanks to Ishvara Srishti, seeing this objectively, a marriage was saved. Otherwise, what happens? I love you in the beginning, and then what? I allow you to go. This is what happens. How is it possible? The same person, which one absolutely cared about, which one could not be separated from, and whose little habits one was endeared by, including the snoring, including, leaving the clothes in a pile on the middle of the floor. You found it cute. When did it become uncute? This is nothing to do with the other person. This is one's own overlay. First, there is a positive projection, which is called Shobhana Adhyasa, a positive projection that happens on everything. All people, including the teacher. Oh, there is nobody like this. And then what? You didn't get what you wanted. Oh, this is the worst. This one is terrible. And then what? I want to fire the teacher and hire another teacher. This is what the feeling is. And these feelings are the subjective overlay based on one's ahankara, the ego, the I notion. And that is where the operation has to take place. Operation Jiva has to take place. So the first kind of projection is a positive projection, which is again seeing more than what it is. And another example of positive projection with regard to objects is what? Is seeing, like for example, money. Money simply is. But there is a positive projection that most people have onto money. What is that? This will give me happiness. That's a positive projection. This will make me feel secure. That is seeing more into the money than what money is. Simply a means of transaction to get what you want to get. That's all it is. It's a means, it's a currency. That's all it is. But if you see it as a ticket to retirement, it's a positive projection. If you see it as a ticket to security and comfort, that's a positive projection. And then, so this is called Shobhana Adhyasa. Then, right on its heels is the negative projection, Ashobhana Adhyasa. Ashobhana Adhyasa means what? The negative projection. Seeing something worse than it is. Negative projection. The weather is out to get me. Negative projection. The whole universe is out to get me. Negative projection. This person doesn't like me. That person hates me. Nobody loves me. Negative projection. or even on an object. This object is going to make me unhappy. Why? Simply because I don't like it and I'm uncomfortable with it. So the negative projection. And so therefore, the whole life goes seeing the universe with the colored glasses of Shobhana Adhyasa, positive projection, and Ashobhana Adhyasa, negative projection. This is the overlay on the Ishvara Srishti, which has to be corrected. Which is the cause of sorrow, which is the cause of fear, which above all is the cause of alienation from the source. That is why the knowledge helps self-knowledge. Vedanta helps. Vedanta helps here primarily because it removes the cataract. In singing the praises of the Guru, an ancient stotra, Guru Stotram says the following. Ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjanashalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namaha unto the teacher. Salutations, surrender unto the teacher. What kind of a teacher is it? It's a teacher who has removed the cataracts through the scalpel of self-knowledge. The cataracts in front of my eyes, the cataracts of ajnanam, the cataracts of self-ignorance. And self-ignorance means what? Self-ignorance with a twist. The cataracts of subjectivity, the teacher has removed with a scalpel of knowledge so that I can see Ishvara in the form of the manifest Jagat clearly. Unto that teacher who has made this possible, my surrender, my salutations. This is just so brilliant. A very, very wonderful way of looking at it. So 9/10 of the knowledge is removing of the colored glasses of the positive and negative projection, projected on very strongly towards the world. And then in order to remove that, in order to drop that, we have to see the source of the projection. The source of the projection is from what we call the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind, which is a storehouse of pains and sorrows from early childhood, is the storehouse of projections, the warehouse of projection. Why is it called warehouse? Because nobody knows where it comes from. That's why it is called warehouse of projections. One doesn't know where it comes from. Suddenly one gets angry. Suddenly one gets ticked off. Suddenly one smiles. Suddenly one is like a mad person. This is all from the uninterrogated, unresolved, unenquired into pains of childhood. So the early childhood is very, interesting. That early childhood one cannot escape. One cannot be dropped into the universe, as a 10-year-old without having to experience the early childhood. Not possible. And the early childhood is fraught with a lot of accidents, so many things, and fraught with a lot of difficulties. And the child here is totally helpless, unable to express itself. Everything the same cry. Nappy change, it cries. Hunger, it cries. And then it cries even though it is, even though it is full, it cries because it's having stomachache, colic. It just keeps crying, crying, crying. And the childhood is not easy. And the parenthood is also not easy. Suddenly these two people have some small entity to take care of. The new mother and father, they are doing their best. But often the best is not enough. The father unavailable, mother available but inconsistent, because they have their own unconscious, they have their own uninterrogated issues. And then what? The child internalizes these issues. It does not think, oh, the mother is having a difficult day. It does not know how to think like that. The brain is not developed. Let me give her a break. The mother is having a hard day. She's cooking, cleaning, working. The child doesn't think that. What does the child think? Mother doesn't love me. This is the this is the subjective understanding of the child. Father doesn't care. I'm therefore what? I must be bad because they seem to be fine. I am the one that is bad. The child internalizes the feeling of not being loved as eminently unlovable, unwanted. And that, it cannot stand to think it is unlovable and unwanted. So Bhagavan comes to the aid and pushes this feeling, these kinds of feelings deep down, so that the child can grow with a smiling face, forgetting about these pains and sorrows until the brain is developed, until the emotional setup, the emotional maturity is there to deal with these sorrows and pains in adulthood. Usually in adulthood. That is when the unconscious comes out. When one is in a relationship of trust, like a significant partnership, a close friendship, marriage, etc. Or if none of these are there, if you want to resolve the unconscious mind, go to an ashram. There again is a place of trust. And all these pains and sorrows come out and they are directed against the teacher, because the teacher reminds one of authority figures in one's life. Mother issues are there, father issues are there, and they are all projected strongly towards the teacher. This is, what should I say, the occupational hazards of being a teacher of spiritual knowledge, of yoga, of Vedanta. One has to go through this. One has to, one has to deal with all kinds of projections. So to be free of these projections, the first thing to do is to own them up. Rather than, it's very easy to see that the world is bad. The world is against me. Bhagavan is against me. Other jivas are against me. The world is bad. The world is just a benign extension of Ishvara, and as though extension. The world is not bad. Neither are you bad. Because this is kind of a black and white polarized thinking. Either I must be bad or the whole world must be bad. What about entertaining a scenario, giving a benefit of doubt to a scenario where neither of those statements are true? This is the thinking of the inner child, that truncated batch of feelings that were pushed down so that one could grow up. Feelings of fear, feelings of dread, feelings of abandonment, feelings of sorrow, anger at not getting one's way, anger at not being understood, are all deep down. They have nothing to do with you. They have nothing to do with the present moment. You are free of them. You are Satchidananda plus a complex, and that plus is an as though plus, a value added plus, like saying clay plus pot, still clay. Clay minus pot, nothing lost, still clay. Clay plus broken pot, cracked pot, still clay. Clay without pot, still clay. This way one is actually always in one's own glory. The feelings are an aberration. And they have no basis. They are simply they simply come under the parallel reality called Jiva Srishti, Jiva's creation. So the technical term is Pratibhasika, that which is a personal projection. Pratibhasikam, your own personal projection. Feeling unwanted, feeling loved, even though one is convinced it's due to the actions of another, it is not. Vedanta, entering Vedanta means I learn first not to blame myself and not to blame others. When self-blame and Jagat blame stops, then one is poised on the road to emotional maturity. and integrating the inner children to 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 be to be secure and safe, and so that they will let you study, that they will let you do karma yoga, they will let you have a spiritual life for which you have a birthright. You have a birthright to a spiritual life. They will let you do that. And that is why this personal subjectivity, this parallel reality needs to be dropped. And how to do that more, some practical tips, etc., we will see in the coming sessions. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you.